Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those in Japan. Today, me and my colleague Chen will present as part of the panel on the future of EU-Asia relations after the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, the outbreak of COVID-19 had disastrous consequences worldwide, with no national borders being able to contain its destroying effects. However, the consequences of this pandemic were not limited just to the sanitary ones, but they affected and they are still affecting also the socio-political sphere as well. In this presentation, we would like to analyze the evolving relationship between China and the European Union with an insight into the Italian and the Chinese perspective during the emergency. As you can see from the outline in the next slide, first we will shortly recap the history of the relations between China and EU, and then we will highlight the effects that the sanitary emergency had on this relationship, focusing finally on the Italian and the Chinese perspective, analyzing how the pandemic was framed by the media and by governmental authorities. I will now leave the floor to my colleague for the first point.
Okay. The EU-China relations were established in 1975, and in the 1980s, the relationship between China and the EU went through a freezing moment. But with the increase in economic relations, China and EU relations have become closer. The EU is China's largest trading partner, and China is also the EU's largest partner. We can see the picture in the slide from
that relations between China and the EU started in 1975, and then for a number of years, actually throughout the 80s, the two actors just had some kind of economic relations. Economy was very important between the two, so there was no, basically very limited political interaction. Then, at a certain point, of course, actually the two entered into this kind of political relation, but eventually only very recently, as the slide says, actually the distrust the European Union feels about China has become more intense, okay, especially in the last couple of years. In March 2019, actually, the European Union has defined China as a strategic competitor. So basically, this kind of rivalry between the two has become more intense, and of course, this is pretty much focused on the fact that basically it is pretty much more difficult for European actors to invest in China. And as far as I can see, actually, the students here want to demonstrate that these kind of limitations basically make Europeans more, how to say, distrustful of China. Laura.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
This was also Chen's slide. I don't know if she managed to connect.
No, I'm checking, but unfortunately she's not back. So you can, I think, move forward to your part.
Okay, then is the next slide. Okay, thank you. So now I will talk more specifically about the relations between China and Italy. So once the virus started to hit Italy, Europe, and other regions such as Africa and the Middle East, Beijing started sending medical experts and much needed medical supplies such as masks and sanitizers to countries that were experiencing the outbreak of the pandemic. Examples of solidarities were seen not just from the government, as you can see from the picture on the left, but also from other figures such as Jack Ma, the wealthiest man in China, who promised 2 million masks to be distributed around European countries, including Italy as well, and also other solidarity actions coming from the Chinese colossal Huawei. The term mask diplomacy has been adopted to describe China's particular style of soft power projection within Europe, obtained through the dispatch of medical delegations, scientific research team, and medical supplies, and its accompanying narratives. The director of the World Health Organization has also described the mask diplomacy as politics of generosity, further underlining its main characteristics. Among these actions of solidarity, the mass donation of masks and supplies to hospitals and charities of the involved countries has been seen by some scholars as a pivotal move to rehabilitate China's image in certain particular areas. And indeed, as we all know, in the beginning of 2020, China witnessed public opinion shatter around the world and its international standing jeopardized, with the country being strongly criticized when COVID-19 first outbroke. This is why some scholars have underlined how these attempts to direct the international narrative during COVID-19 pandemic can be considered as an effort to build a new and positive image of the country and restore trust in its ability to operate as a main power in the international system. In this way, the mass diplomacy has been understood as an attempt at countering the critics and the consequent resulting image of China. The country's self-framing as a pragmatic and action-driven actor has been defined by some scholars as crucial in encouraging the establishment of alliances with China in a moment in which the European membership seemed to be revealing its weaknesses. It is important to point out that China's image as a responsible stakeholder is not new, and it was not created during the pandemic, but it is actually historically rooted in the country's political discourse. In the slide, you can see on the right a bar graph from a research made in 2020 that shows how the population of certain countries, including Italy, has perceived foreign aid during the pandemic, and China was the most popular answer among Italian respondents. This is why it is important to talk about mass diplomacy and its effects, as it has shaped the perception of certain countries, or at least of certain segments of the population. In this regard, the relations between China and Italy make an interesting case, and we decided to analyze them starting from the respective discursive frameworks that we observed starting from the media, newspapers, and political authorities' speeches and interventions. Bilateral relations between the two countries had experienced a revival shortly before the pandemic, and their connection was strengthened in different sectors. However, when Italy started experiencing its first cases of COVID-19 in the beginning of February 2020, the relations between the two powers became tense, and Italy was the first and the sole European country to suspend all air traffic to and from China. The tense situation did not improve, but actually worsened, with certain obstacles and events such as the difficult repatriation of Italian citizens from China. When it comes to how Italy has framed COVID-19 in relation to China, there are different stages to be taken into account according to how the virus expanded geographically. In the beginning of 2020, so before the Italian emergency, when the virus was still affecting mostly China, the Chinese community in Italy was among the worst hit segments of the population, both economically and socially. According to the Italian Chinese Business Association, Chinese restaurateurs in the city of Milan suffered losses of about 50 to 60% due to the generalized fear among Italian consumers, and this was before any lockdown was even implemented in the country. Episodes of xenophobia and racism became more and more frequent towards the Chinese community, not just among the population, but also in the media and among public figures as well. In the slide, you can see a sad example of such discrimination with a phrase taken from a public intervention broadcasted on a regional TV from the president of the Veneto region, Luca Zaia. He then apologized after being called out by the Chinese embassy for these discriminatory phrases. But these kind of episodes were not isolated, as further proved by the other two images that you can see on the slide. On the top, you can see an example of a newspaper title from Italy, where COVID-19 was often referred to as the Wuhan virus, in this way defining it geographically and in clear and discriminatory terms. Moreover, you can see also the third picture, which was also shown yesterday in another presentation. There was a sign that was shown in the capital city of Rome in front of a bar, inviting Chinese visitors not to access the place. These episodes and the repercussions on the Chinese community in Italy reached a level in which, when the intervention of China's ambassador in Italy, Li Junhua, was required, and actually he appeared many times on national television during that month. It is interesting, going to the next slide, to observe how the discursive framework changed once Italy became one of the first countries to be severely hit by the virus in Europe in March. And China, through the policy previously described, so the mass diplomacy, sent aid to Italy with medical supplies and medical teams arriving to provide help to the country during one of its worst moments since the beginning of the pandemic. And actually, Xi Jinping himself expressed support to Italy in a message to the Italian President Sergio Mattarella in mid-March, when the country was being heavily hit by the virus. In the slide, there are various article titles reporting the aid provided by China to Italy. And there is a picture from a video uploaded on Facebook by Di Maio, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, that showed the arrival of the Chinese medical team and medical supplies in Italy and defined it as a clear example of solidarity. He also underlined how, thanks to the arrival of this aid, we were no longer alone. There is clearly a different attitude than the one shown and described in the previous slide, and this change of framework in the narrative around China was probably influenced by what we have defined as the mass diplomacy that was being deployed by Beijing at the time. And now it should be Chen's turn, but I don't know if she managed to connect.
No, unfortunately, she is not back. I think she's, this was her slide, correct?
Yes.
The Chinese discursive framework. Do you know which was her input on that?
I can try reading shortly what she has sent me, if it's okay. I apologize in advance.
No problem.
The first stage that was deployed by China was to create an image of actively fighting the COVID-19. Since the first major area of infection was in Wuhan, China at the time, the Chinese government was in a very bad situation. On the one hand, the large number of infections and deaths in Wuhan, the lack of medical resources and the lack of effective treatment have made Chinese uneasy and dissatisfied with Chinese governments. On the other hand, the COVID-19 first became widespread in China, and fear caused people in other countries to start discriminating against Chinese people, as I also mentioned before. People in other countries call this virus the Wuhan virus, and people abroad feel that the Chinese government is incompetent because the Chinese government's inaction led to the spread of the COVID-19. So at the time, the Chinese government used the media to create an image of actively fighting the COVID-19, trying to tell the outside world that we are working hard to control the COVID-19 and we are getting better. The second stage used by the media is to fight back. After the domestic situation in China stabilized, the Chinese government began to find a place where the disease started, trying to correct the claim that the first patient appeared in China, trying to get rid of the name of the Chinese virus and the name of Wuhan virus. At this stage, Chinese news reporters and government official media have published a lot of content about the source of the disease. For example, the picture on the left is a tweet of a Chinese official who said that the first patient was in the United States and the United States owed China an explanation. The third stage is the usage of the media to create a friendly image of actively assisting other countries. After China's mass diplomacy began, there were a lot of reports of China assisting other countries. And at this stage, the Chinese government used not only the Chinese media, but also the media of countries receiving Chinese assistance to change the image of China. For example, the picture on the right is the one that appeared in various media reporting China's aid to Serbia, also one of the countries that received a lot of medical aid from China. So now there is the conclusion. And this was also Chen's part, but what she wanted to highlight was that, of course, there is ongoing debates about the future of China-EU relations due to the COVID impact, and there are different possibilities that could develop in the future. One is, as you can see in the slide, that they could become more strained. The second one is that the trade could stabilize, and finally some could argue that the pandemic could actually be an opportunity to promote the development of the relationship and to eliminate prejudice against China. However, we thought that the last option could be the least probable after the examples that we have shown in our presentation. So thank you for the attention, and I'm sorry for the problems.